Real JP Multimedia, proud sponsor of the Nerdball Podcast. Here to help you with all things audio, video, graphics, photo, web design. From weddings to real estate, commercial business to private use, we offer a big variety of services for almost any budget. And if we can't do it, we will find someone who can. Find us at realjp.com. That's REELJP.com. Real JP Multimedia.
I'm Keith Bergman, and this is the Nerdball Podcast.
This is the Nerdball Podcast with Lorenzo Melcher.
Great. All right, Keith. Thanks for coming on my podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We've known each other for a while. You were actually on the podcast when we did like COVID calls during COVID.
That's right. Yeah.
So let's make this one a little more happy and not COVID.
Right.
How you been doing, man?
Been busy.
Yeah.
Been all kinds of. I quit comedy. I came back to comedy. It was a whole thing.
Yeah. Well, we'll definitely get into all that. The first thing I want to have you do, though, is I tend to forget the premise of my podcast. The beginning thing is I always ask people, like, what are you nerding out about lately? Something you've been into, something, if it's been your whole life or something recent. The only thing is it can't be your job. It's just something, and I know a lot about you, so I kind of probably know what you're going to say, but something that you just, like, something to, like, kind of get away from life and just, like, be focused on this thing.
Does it count if it's something that's maybe turning into a job?
Yeah, because, well, and we'll get into, you don't really have a job.
Right.
But yeah, that's fine.
The thing, I mean, you know about me that I'm really into old video games and old computers, and I have been sort of rediscovering programming.
Okay.
Like I'm coding on 40-year-old computers.
So why?
It's, well, for one thing, I know how to do it. I don't know how to code on a new machine. But,
Okay, all right.
There's something really fun about just making it do stuff, or like, bringing to life an idea that I might have had when I was a kid for this computer when it was all I had.
Yeah.
And I can't, I didn't know how to do it then, but now I have the patience and and I can sit and make it work. And the reason I said it might turn into a job thing, I have a friend of mine who is a software programmer by trade. Mm-hmm. He's actually taking some of my old retro games and turning them into apps.
Oh, really?
We have one that's almost finished. We're going to launch hopefully the beginning of the year. It's a really simple game. It's basically like, it's called Dice Crash, and the premise is basically Yahtzee meets Tetris.
Okay.
So the dice come down and you have to arrange them and try to form hands and get points.
Wow.
And so I made this game like years ago on the Texas Instruments 994A computer. And
I don't even know what that is. That seems really old.
It was discontinued in 1983.
Oh, wow.
So it has your microwave probably has more computing power now.
That's crazy.
It came with like 16K of memory and like very primitive sound and graphics and stuff. But I made it on this thing. I released it. There's a very small little community of people still playing with these things, and these couple dozen nerds saw it and played with it, and it kind of came and went. And then my friend Matt was like, "This would make a really good phone game."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Whatever." And so all these life gets in the way. Years go by, and then one day he just starts sending me screenshots and videos of like the game in progress.
That's insane.
So
it's such a niche thing, because you just said there's a couple dozen people that are with these computers.
Right.
Does it, because it's old, I feel like you're doing this for you, right? Because you want to do this. Like, it's not, now it's turned into a moneymaker, but you didn't think about that. Like, hey, I'm going to take this device that was discontinued in 1983 and start doing stuff with it.
Right. It was never going to be like a side hustle or a second job. It was just something I get a kick out of doing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a connection to my childhood. And, I used to sit when I was a kid and I would program. This thing was so old. It had disk drives, like floppy disk drives, but they were so expensive. All I had was a cassette player. Like, literally, you recorded your sound and you would record your programs on a cassette, and it sounded like a fax machine.
Wow.
And it made this horrible noise, and it took like 5 minutes to save your game. And then if you forgot and reset the computer, you lost everything.
Oh, no.
Which I did a couple times when I was a kid and would freak out.
Sure,
but,
yeah.
It's fun. It's fun from a collector standpoint. Like I collect all the old game cartridges and stuff like that, and I buy and sell some of that stuff. That's part of my quote unquote I work from home and I sell stuff. I sell music mostly, but
Yeah.
I do sell like some retro stuff online as well. So it kind of grew out from that, but it was never a thing of like, this is going to be, I'm going to make a big popular game on the iPhone.
Yeah.
It was always just like, this is, but at the same time, I like the idea. I figure if you can make a game on 40-year-old technology that's still fun, then it's a good game.
Oh yes, yeah.
Because I think a lot of games come out and they look amazing because it's like you can kind of prefab together a game out of like whatever assets. If you buy the software or whatever, you can kind of cobble something together that looks amazing, but it doesn't have any actual gameplay to it.
Yeah.
But if you can make a game, I mean, that's why like Tetris was so popular in the first place. It was the most simplistic thing in the world, but it was addictive.
Yep.
And you could play it on a phone or a watch. It was so, even back in the day, it was such a simple game, but it's people are still playing it today.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the goal. Like, I wanted to make something cool, but it's mostly just it's kind of, to me, it's like the computer equivalent of doodling or just drawing in a sketchbook. It's like, it's like, here's a cool idea, and then and the nice thing about old computers is you just fire it up and start typing and you're coding. It's not there's no barrier to entry at all. It's very simple, print this, go to this, input this. It's very simple old school stuff.
Well, that's awesome, and that's like the perfect answer to this question, because some people have whatever they're into, right? And that is like super like here's this one track, here's this thing, and it but also you're doing it because it's fun, and that's what I want with this question. Like, yes, you do things for your job that are fun, but you have to do these things. What's something you don't have to do but you want to do it?
Right.
And that's a great example of that.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I actually one of my COVID projects when we were locked down was for years I've had one room of our basement that was going to be, I always call it the war room, and that was going to be where because I have probably a dozen old computers. I have a Texas Instruments, Commodore 64, an Apple II, some other forgotten technology, and for years it just all like a lot of it just sat in boxes. It was I didn't actually get to go downstairs and play with it. I didn't get to do it. I would dig stuff out if I was selling things or whatever, but I wasn't having any fun with it. It was just kind of this big hoardery mess in the basement. So I started. I was not on the road doing comedy. I couldn't go anywhere really. So I sort of took some time and actually just emptied that room out and started over. I had an electrician come in, rewire the whole room. I have like 36 plug outlets on their own circuit breaker. And I just went nuts buying like 6-foot tables and shelves from IKEA. And my wife put those together. But I think she was just excited that it was going to become something useful for once.
Yes,
and
something neat and orderly.
Right, and it's not even close to that yet, but it's further than it's ever been.
Sure, yeah.
And it's almost like a little computer museum in my house.
Yeah.
And all my books, each of these computers, I've got manuals, I've got packages for the software, and so now I can go. All of them are set up. I can just go click them, fire them up, and play a game or type some stuff. Or and if I get new stuff, I don't like get it and let it sit on my table for 6 months while I stare at it. I can actually go fire it up and test it out.
So when you buy like new to you computers, are they not working and you got to get them back working, or is there a mix of that?
It depends on the company. The nice thing about Texas Instruments was they were like a defense contractor, so all their stuff was built like crazy tough.
Oh, okay.
So pretty much every Texas Instruments thing I buy, it could be sitting in a barn for 3 decades. I fire it up, it works.
No kidding.
Commodore stuff, terrible. Like really flimsy. Like the disk drives go out of alignment. And I'm not a big hardware guy. I'm not really big on like taking things apart and fixing them. There's I have a couple really old computers going back to like 76, 77. And a couple of those, like in like the user groups and stuff online, they tell you like, if you buy one, don't even turn it on.
Oh, really?
Because it's probably going to catch on fire. You're going to see white smoke come out the back.
Holy crap.
Unless you do X, Y, and Z before you even fire it up.
Yeah.
So though there's a couple, and that's where a lot of people get into the hobby, but I'm more of like a coder or like a game player. And
so when you look for these, you're looking like, hey, are they operational?
Yeah, I like to find ones that work or find ones that, what I'll do a lot of times is I'll buy a collection just to get a few of the pieces of software. Okay. Because there's a lot of the stuff. I mean, most of these systems you can get an emulator and play it on like a Windows PC. But there are some software that never made that jump. That there was one that I found that hadn't been archived anywhere recently. I found it on a disc. It was an adventure game this guy put out in 1983. and I cannot remember the name right now, but it was like one of those old texted, like there's no graphics. It's just
Okay.
you type in like go north and it says you're walking to the castle.
Okay.
And then you have to find things and interact with this wizard that's trying to kill you and stuff. But this game pretty much was lost. It didn't exist. Like there was no, you would Google it, nothing. There was like, we found one picture of an ad in like a scanned old computer magazine from 1983. That was it. And then I was going through these random discs and I found it. And I was like, oh my, I think that's, so we found this lost
The
game.
Holy Grail of it.
And so I copied all the files and I put it up on one of the one of the user forums, and it's out there now, and it's like part of the canon, But
Yeah.
it's that's my favorite thing, is to find stuff like that. Some dude sat there 40 years ago, probably thinking he was gonna make some money. He's gonna start his little software company, and sat there at his kitchen table writing his game, and then it probably sold 9 copies. And it was just lost to history, but then we found it. So it's like archaeology, kind of.
I think part of finding these hobbies and these secondary things to get away is also finding people who also like these things.
Yes.
Because you're so like you explain this to me, like I know some of what you're talking about, but you can like really nerd out to these other people because they know everything you're talking about, and they know all these things. They're like, hey, I was looking for this one thing, and then 2 guys like, oh, I have that one thing.
Right.
To be able to have this community of people to help with your hobby or with this thing you're doing.
Yeah, like they get the entry level references and stuff. They might, or they or like with the coding stuff, there are a couple guys. Yeah, a lot of Europeans, for some reason, are still into the old stuff. And when I was working on my dice game, actually, I was putting up pictures of I was putting up screenshots of the game, and like, hey, I'm working on this. And there were a couple places where I had some issues, like figuring out how to do the scoring and stuff. And they had some really good suggestions for everything from like helping me fix some code to like helping me like find a bug in the code, or even. And then one guy was like, hey, try this with your font. And like he showed me this thing to make the numbers a little bit smaller, but then they had a little more space between them on the screen, and nobody would have,
Yeah, wow.
It's the weirdest, because there's this weird, like you have to do this like weird to make the graphics on the TI. I don't want to get too in the weeds here, but you have to define all these like lines with like 16-bit. It's called hexadecimal. Like it's like 0 through 9, and then 10 through 15 is like A, B, C, D, E, F.
Okay.
So like if you want to light up these 4 pixels, but not this one, you type a B. If you want this, you type a C. And this dude figured out a way to like shrink the numbers and make more space so that it looked better. It was just an aesthetic thing on the screen. But nobody would have.
And that's where you can find these guys.
Right.
And it's so, I'm sure it's not lost on you guys that the way you're able to progress with this old technology is because of new technology.
Yeah. Oh, it's absolutely. It's interesting, the history of this stuff, because there was a point I had a TI up into the like mid 90s. It was old then. And I, finally just got to a point where I'm like, what am I doing with it? At the time I was like, I think I sold it to somebody for very little money. And then there was a point when like the last couple, there used to be user groups that like met in person and shared software and had, gave little presentations and stuff. And the last few years, like the mid 90s, people were just showing up at these user groups with all their stuff. Like, hey, who wants this? It's free. I'm clearing, I'm decluttering.
Yeah.
And it was really on the decline until the internet became a thing. And like people started getting on AOL, they started getting on message boards. Even before social media, they were finding them. Someone would put up a website that was like, there's actually one called 99er.net that's been around, I know, since the early 2000s, and it was like a focal point for people who would like, hey, you know what, I really had I played with this when I was a kid, or I learned how to program on this, and now I work for IBM, or something, and people then would like, well, I'm going to pick one of these up again and just sit and play some games and have fun, and then it turned into a thing. I think you see people that'll get back into it, and like the TI had a really big library of educational cartridges, like games, because you could just plug them in like an Atari cartridge.
Yeah.
So it was great for little kids who didn't have to try to load something off of a disc or learn commands or whatever. So they had all these like counting games and stuff. So people would buy these for their grandkids and set them in front of this 40-year-old computer to learn their ABCs with and stuff.
Wow. Were you always into this stuff, even as a little Keith Bergman?
I was into it, and I could never have it. And it's not lost on me that part of this is probably just me making up for my childhood. And I actually do a bit about this on stage sometimes, because my dad always thought it was bullshit. He didn't like any. He thought it was, when I wanted an Atari back in the day, it was like, oh, it's a fad. No one's gonna video games. Who's gonna be playing those in a year? Missed the mark completely. And what makes me laugh about that is looking back. He was young. Like, I think back now, like, he seemed like the oldest man in the world.
Yep,
like, this is
always.
so. And then I look back, you were like 26, dude. What? Have some fun. Come play Pac-Man with me. But he was not into it, and we were pretty poor. Not not like poverty, but like we weren't. He didn't have the money.
Extra money for that.
Yeah, we weren't gonna. And at the time, dropping what at the time would have probably been $300 or $400 on a computer that honestly didn't really do anything. I think there was a big surge back in the early 80s of like, it's a computer in your house, and then people got it like, I'm going to balance my checkbook, and the commercials would always show people with like bar graphs on the screen, like it's making my life easy, and then you get it and like, I have nothing.
What are you doing with this?
I can play a kind of a crappy version of Donkey Kong, and I can maybe do my taxes in about 3 times as long as it would take to do it on paper.
That's my dad, well, not my dad. I think my grandma was the one who, like, she'd buy us everything and anything we wanted. So we always had video games. We always had something. And that's, I always grew up playing video games and having that stuff. And I never, like, got into it. Like, hey, how do I want to make one of these,
right.
Because it's for me, I just wanted to play it. Where's in your brain, when did that kick in? Like, these are so fun. I want to learn how to do my own.
I think for me, it was like because I didn't have one, and I didn't have a game system. I didn't have an Atari with pre-made games. So before I even had a computer, I would check out books from the library, and they were all about programming and coding. Because I think back in the day, they really thought everyone was going to have to learn to write their own programs.
Okay.
Like, I don't think they fully foresaw like it just becoming a thing that you could get that any needs you had for a program would already be done by somebody. So there was all this push to teach basic programming in school, and like we had a Radio Shack, a TRS-80 computer in my grade school. We had one for the whole school on like a TV VCR cart that they wheeled around. And nobody did anything with it because the teachers had nobody really asked for it. It just kind of showed up one day. And so I went to the library, and all the books I got were like, write your own program, like write a program that picks a random number and lets you guess it. And I would get kids standing in line in the hallway to play this stupid, like, guess the number game because I was the only one that could do anything with the computer.
How old were you when you were doing this?
Oh, God, probably like 9 or 10.
Okay, all right.
And so it just always became a thing. Like, learning to make it do stuff was always just part of learning it. It wasn't. Okay. And I think if I had started with a video game system, I might not have gone that way because I would have been used to just, well, here's a cartridge, Pac-Man's on it. Yeah. But and being able, and then like getting programs like one of the big things back in the day was the computer magazines that you'd buy would have type-in programs. So you would like, oh, here's a game you can play, but you have to type 350 lines of code, and if you get one thing wrong, it's not going to work. And then next month there'd be, oh, hey, we made a mistake in the printing. Here's an error correction.
Here's why it was our fault.
Yeah, after 12 hours of trying to debug it yourself. So it was just kind of part of that culture back then. Like, you didn't really have a computer without at least taking a stab at like making things for it yourself.
Was there? You talked about when you were 9 or 10 doing this, and is that when you just keep doing it? Or was there a time where like, hey, I'm not into it anymore. I'm gonna do something else.
I got out of it like when I sold my TI. I messed around with it up until probably college, and then I needed to buy like an actual current system that I could turn homework in on and stuff, and. So, and that's when I kind of got in. I actually bought a Commodore Amiga, which was a really great computer that it was like the next step up from the Commodore 64 and those. And it was a really good game system, but it wasn't as popular here. It was kind of like the nowadays of like whether you're like a PC gamer or an Xbox, like I had this Amiga and it was like the hit of the dorm room because I had SimCity and I had Desert Strike and all these games that were like probably like Sega games, like Sega Genesis era games.
Okay.
And that's when I sort of stopped doing as much programming and was more like just playing games and just using the computer as like a functional tool because it finally had gotten to the point where they were somewhat
You could do
useful.
that. Yeah. Where'd you go to college at?
I went to UT. I didn't finish, but I came up here. That's the whole reason I live here. I got a scholarship to go to UT.
Oh, really?
So I moved.
Where are you from then?
New Philadelphia, Ohio.
Okay. All right.
It's a little town of just right south of Akron and Canton.
All right. And what were you going to school for?
Well, I was because I was so into computers, I was thinking about programming, and I always wonder like if I had stuck with it and actually tried. But when I got past, I mean, I've never been a big math guy, and the first thing they're like, well, I mean, because I was taking AP classes in school, in high school, and I got to like trig and calculus, and it was like my brain deflated.
Yeah.
I think I might have. I don't know if I actually failed calculus, but if not, I was skin of my teeth to even pass the class.
Well, better than my brain deflated at algebra too. So
I was okay up to like algebra, like that makes sense to me, and a lot of basic programming is pretty much algebra. It's a lot of like very simple formulas and comparing numbers and things like that. But then geometry and theorems and stuff like anything from there on, and calculus was just like, no, I don't like. And the first thing they're like, well, when you get to college and start doing computer programming, you're gonna have to get right back into all this heavy math. And I'm like, I'm gonna start writing.
Oh, that's what I was going to ask you. So because of that, you're just like, I'm not going to college anymore, or did you try to transition to an English major? Or
I
something?
did, yeah. I went to English to an English major. I was in the honors program, so I was supposed to do this big independent project and stuff. But honestly, it was just I went from a town of 20,000 people to Toledo, which, you know, when we drove across the bridge, crossing the river for the first time to go up to see my dorm and stuff, it was like a movie, you know, like this massive city. It's got the silos over here. It's all gritty. And I'm just like, what's going on? You know? And I just didn't adjust well. I wasn't serious about it. I didn't want to go.
Yeah.
And it was,
You don't want to go to college at all?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
I wanted to I knew I was very much on that. Like I have to go eventually, but all I really wanted was to hang out with my friends.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I'd gotten that scholarship, if I hadn't gotten the scholarship, I don't know if I might still be managing a Subway in New Philadelphia. Because that's all, I mean, I had my friends that were a little bit older that I would like go, like they had computers and video games, and then they would like, I'd go to my one friend Scott's house and they would play Dungeons and Dragons and I would hang out. And it's like, he was a little bit older than me. He had his own place. He had money. He had a car. And I'm like, that's the dream. That's it. That's all. Why would you want anything else?
Yeah.
And so I would have probably just stayed and put off going to college forever.
Well, there's I mean, at some point there was like everyone has to go to college, and it's still kind of that way, but people are starting to pull back a little bit from that, I think, or I feel that way. I know when I talk to high school kids, coaching them, you know, I ask what they want to do, and like, oh, I think I want to go to college, or I want to do this, or I want to go to the military, all this stuff. I was talking to a friend of mine. He says, instead of asking like, what do you want to do, he goes, I always ask, what's the lifestyle you want to live? Because that kind of lends to, well, I want to be like this. And then here's the job. Well, then here's what things are open for you.
Yeah, that was one of the few things that I like pat myself on the back with my son. He's 21 now, and he's actually in the Air Force. But he was having a really rough time in high school because the same thing. He hit the same point I did, where he just kind of quit caring. Yeah, it seemed like it wasn't worth it. He didn't want to do it. So he was struggling a little bit, and I kind of had to talk with him. And the best way I could put it was sort of in that same way. Like, I'm the worst person to tell you got to buckle down and do it, because I certainly didn't. But I also spent a lot of my single life before I married your mom really broke, like starving artist, you know, crappy apartment. I couldn't go buy a new PlayStation when it came out. I couldn't have a good car. I didn't have any car for a while because I was so broke. And it was like, I made the choices I made, and I don't regret any of them. But you don't want to live like that. Yeah. I know you, and you don't want to be that guy. You want that material stuff. You want that comfort level. You have to do enough to get yourself that. Yeah. And it kind of sunk in for him, and he kind of turned it around a little bit. And then when he wasn't really feeling it with college, especially when COVID hit and the remote learning and stuff, he just kind of checked out. But he knew he needed that sort of little bit of discipline, little bit of routine. And he just kind of sat down and looked at his options and said, look, I'm going to try the Air Force. And I wasn't crazy about it as a parent, but then he's thriving now.
Yeah.
He got that, and he's got his associate's degree. He's
Oh,
doing
nice.
better than he didn't tell us he was working on it until he got it.
Oh, really?
Because
Well, yeah. What was the reason behind that?
I think he just didn't want to mess it up, or he didn't want to
Okay.
you know.
All right.
I
don't
think,
want to jinx this.
or he might have thought that we would be like, "Oh, you quit school and now you're going to,"
Yeah.
But I'm just happy he's doing it, and he's racking up commendations and stuff. He's
Yeah.
doing really well, and I think he just needed that little bit of structure, that little bit of you gotta wake up, do this, do that, and and it's a good, and it's obviously it's a great path. It's good service, and it's a good path. Later on, I mean, he's gonna be able to write his own ticket pretty much.
Sure.
So it was a good choice, but I think a lot of it came from just realizing where it's not so much like you have to do X, Y, and Z or you're a failure. It's like how do you figure out where you want to be and then get to that point.
Yeah. I've never known so many people like my age, almost 40, where they know what they want to do when they retire. And like I even talked to my friend yesterday. I was at a birthday party and we were talking about the Tennessee-Georgia football game. And he goes, "I'm trying to turn myself into a Tennessee fan because that's where we're going to retire." And we're not 40 yet.
Right.
But I know a lot of people like that. But that's the same thing. Like I know where I want to be at the end. So how do I get there and how do I do it the most comfortable way?
Right.
And
I think some of that, and I think about this stuff a lot actually, because some of that I think comes from growing up, not doing well, being broke. And when you're broke, you never think long term. You're always putting out fires.
Yeah.
Where is the rent coming from? Where is my car insurance coming from? Where, groceries? What am I, especially trying to raise kids? It's like, and when we first got married, we spent a lot of time behind the 8 ball, just trying to make things work or get through the next crisis. And then it really took a long time to realize we were in a position to think long term. Like we hadn't ever really, we were more comfortable and we kind of very slowly made our way up to that point. And then it took a long time to get out of that mindset though.
But at some point you're like, wait, we have money left over?
Right.
Yeah.
Like it was like, well, why don't we buy, we actually before this morning, my wife said something about buying a new dishwasher next spring.
Yeah.
And I said, well, the dishwasher is not broken yet. And that's that mindset.
Yeah,
and as soon as I said it, I realized how it sounded. But it's really hard to unlearn a lifetime of habits like that.
Yeah. Especially, when you, even as a kid, like when you see that, you're like, oh, it might not, as a 9-year-old, you might not think, well, I'm not going to live like this. But in the back of your brain, it gets stored. And when you get older, like, oh, yeah, I don't want to do this right now.
Right. You feel like you feel extravagant. Like, well, I have money now for a dishwasher, but then what if I buy that dishwasher and then I don't have any money ever again? It's never going to happen.
Like, sometimes I feel like, we're saving money. What are we saving it for though? Like if there's something we need, let's get it. Or if there's an experience we can give our children, let's, give them that experience.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of stuff too. There's a lot of stuff that I used to get really upset about, like spending money on things I could do, even if I hated doing them, and even if it took me forever to do them.
Yep.
We started paying someone to mow our lawn a couple years ago, and it's the most liberating thing in the world. But the first couple of times, like I felt guilty. Like this dude's happy to be there because I'm paying him to be there, and I didn't want to like make eye contact with him from the window because I'm like, I'm not manly enough. I should be out there doing that. And, but I don't want to do it. And I've got things to do in the house that are, and I mean, from a strict dollars and cents standpoint, I work from home. I can be generating income when instead of out mowing the lawn.
Correct. Yeah.
And just from a quality of life standpoint, I don't want to do it.
Yep.
So
for sure. Yeah.
So it just makes, and he's going to do a better job. And I hand him some money and it's not a problem anymore. And I don't ever want to lose the little bit of a sense that is a luxury, and it's a privilege to be able to do that. But it's also something we worked for. 100%. And I think you have to give yourself that little. That's a better reward than like, oh, we have money left over, let's go buy a bunch of ice cream, or I don't know. Sure. It's a more material thing, but it's still kind of that thing of treating yourself or rewarding yourself for putting in the work.
That's the hardest thing to do for me as a dad, like buy myself stuff. Like it's and I talk to other parents, it's so hard to do. And that's the same thing with that. Like you're buying yourself time, right? You're buying yourself time, and the feeling of not doing that, or like, oh crap, I got to go mow the lawn. I don't want to do this. But right. it's such a difficult thing. As you can see down here, there's kids stuff everywhere, because that's what we want. Like It's so hard, like even to buy a hat. You know, like I don't want
Right.
to spend this $25.
Yeah, I've gone. I will spend an entire year rotating the same 2 or 3 pairs of jeans because it's just like you're not broke, dude. Go buy
Yeah.
jeans, but then I can wash these jeans. It's like,
When you said you were in college, you were programming like, hey, I just want to write, and obviously that's what you've been doing for a long time. When in your, I know you were in bands, you're a stand-up comic, you write stuff. When did that, I guess, all that art stuff, when did that start? Or when did you want to do that?
I think I got really into music in high school. And there again, it was like a thing. I didn't get into it as a fan without also wanting to make it.
Okay.
And I don't know if that's just a thing about me or, and I don't have that anymore about music, but I did for a long time.
Mhm.
Like my friend and I, my best friend in high school, actually the guy who's coding my game
Oh.
for the app, he had a little guitar and I bought this crappy little drum set and we
Yeah.
were just banging out. And then, but I also, at the same time, I was getting more knowledgeable about music and I came to UT. And one of the most meaningful things I did here was start to work at the college radio station.
Mhm.
And I started like hosting the heavy metal show on Saturday nights. And I learned a lot more then. I started writing music reviews. I started writing about music, interviewing bands. And that grew out of that. Meanwhile, I was playing music, getting a little better. And, I started some bands up here. And over the years, made a couple different albums with a couple very small bands. And
What was your first band's name?
oh God, well, the very first band.
It's like Keith and Scott.
Well, my friend Matt and I had we had all kinds of bands that didn't do anything. The very first tape I have of us playing anything, there was a book about the environment on my science teacher's shelf called Toxic Terror.
And that was the name of your
So
band?
I have a tape that's like Toxic Terror jam tape, and it's literally just 2 idiots and like, hey, brr, brr, blah, blah. It's like the worst.
Yeah.
But the first band that I did anything relatively serious with, was a band called Chicken Dog.
How did you come up with that?
Well, they were already formed. The guitar player and the singer moved up here to go to school also.
Mm-hmm.
They were a couple of years younger than me, and I joined up and played drums with them, and we recorded a CD. We got to open for Kid Rock a couple times.
Oh, really?
Way before he got
Sure,
it was
sure.
weird. Kid Rock's career arc was weird because he had gotten a little bit famous in like 90, 91
Okay.
and then dropped off. And everyone thought he was like already washed up. Like he was we played with him in like 95 or 96 in front of like 100 people.
Oh, no shit.
And I will say he was the nicest dude.
Yeah.
Not crazy about his music or his persona now or whatever, but
Yeah.
he was super nice to us. One of the drunkest men I've ever met in my life. And couldn't keep a band together. Every time he showed up, he had a whole different lineup
Oh
of
my
musicians. But then, like a year later, like, hey, Kid Rock got a deal with Atlantic Records. Like, what? Kid Rock? And next thing you know, it's like, oh God.
Next thing you know, it's Ball with the Ball.
Right. It was ridiculous. Like we saw him do that song and I Am the Bull God before the album came out in front of like a couple hundred people maybe at the asylum.
Really?
In the old asylum in downtown Toledo. And I was just like, who's going to spend money on this guy? And that shows what I know about music.
All those reviews you wrote in college, they're garbage now.
Pretty much. But yeah, I did that. And then the band that I was in, like that did the most was called the PB Army, which was the guitarist and I from Chicken Dog and a couple different bass players went through. And you're old enough, you get the name. It's the old Pass Blue
Yes,
Ribbon, PB
yep.
Army,
Yep.
ASAP. So we did 2 albums. We actually toured a lot of very little like low rent van, get in the van and play dive bars and
okay.
other places. But it was a lot of fun. We got reviewed in some magazines in Europe, and we for a little bit we were kind of like, oh, we're gonna go somewhere with this, and it kind of fizzled like those things do.
Yeah.
And the more it kind of became a grind and a exhausting to be a band guy. Like, it's really hard once you hit like 30. If you haven't already achieved some success as a musician, then you're that guy. You're like, come see my band. And everyone at work's like, no, we have to go to bed.
I always felt that way whenever I was like doing even just open mics. Like, hey,
Right.
come check it out. And it's like, why do we want to do that?
Yeah, it's Tuesday. I'm not getting a sitter to watch you do 5 minutes of jokes. It's tough. But but I realized though that the things I liked about being in a band, I liked the like really DIY touring and the setting things up, and I liked making merch. I liked kind of running things, and I liked having all the creative control. So the more I started like diving into stand up a little bit, the more I was like, well, I think I'm going to go with this because it's way easier than carrying drums around.
I was going to ask you, like, what did you go? It sounded like you went right from that to comedy.
There was a little bit of overlap. Like the band wasn't officially over. We actually recorded most of the tracks for a third album, and it was doing that kind of really put the nail in the coffin for me because I was getting older. I was singing and playing drums, and I don't have a great singing voice, first of all. But I was kind of making it work. But the older I got, like I was losing some range, and I was like having a hard time singing in the studio, and I just wasn't super jazzed about doing it anymore. I lost the enthusiasm. Yeah. And then I started doing this new thing, and the new thing is making me happy. And it was like there was a little bit of overlap, but not much. Like by the time I really started going out on road trips and stuff for comedy, the band was pretty much done.
And when you started comedy, well, I think about like these tracks that you started for a third album. Maybe it'll be like that game you found like years from now. Like, look at this never released of these guys. Remember Chicken Dog? Yeah, it's two of these guys. Yeah.
The answer to remember Chicken Dog is always no.
But when you started comedy, what was the scene like here in Toledo?
It was just starting to become more open. I had actually tried to do comedy a very long time, like for a short time in the early, like 2001, 2002. And at that time it was really hard. There were no open mics like at bars or anything. The old comedy club Connections, which was down on the south end of Toledo, they had an open mic, quote unquote, which was 3 5-minute spots before the show. Because they ran shows from Wednesday to Saturday.
Okay.
So you could come in and do 3 minutes on Wednesday night if you were one of the first 3 callers on Monday.
Oh, really?
So everybody that wanted to do time was like, it was like trying to win tickets on a radio station.
I think because I graduated high school in 2003, and I think I called and signed my friend up.
Oh, that was always, and
he did a really good job. But
it used to, it always made me, it makes me laugh now, but whenever like us quote unquote serious comedian, we were in there we're gonna become comedians, and then one of the 3 spots would get taken up, like I dared my friend to do this, or we would get so mad, and then the guy would just get up and be like, yeah, I didn't really want to do this, but Bill made me sign up.
Well, the good thing for me is I knew he wanted to do stand-up comedy, so at least that was part of it,
right?
But I can understand that, yeah.
But now it's like clear none of this matters. But at the time we were like, he's taking time away. If I'd have had that 5 minutes, I'd be famous now.
No, you wouldn't. No.
But when I came back in like 2010, there was a coffee shop over on Central called Ground Level.
Okay.
And Steve Weary, who used to do comedy around here,
he
actually runs a cool little pinball bar on the south side now, over on Heather Downs by the distillery. And he had an open mic there. And I met some of the guys. I met some people who were out doing like road comedy and like actually getting paid gigs.
Yeah.
And it was a really nice it was one of those nice little moments in time where for about 6 months, there was a decent little 10 or 20 or 30 people that would show up and actually watch the mic. Open mics kind of seem to have a life cycle where if it's like sometimes they'll catch and they'll have a really good run, and then either like the venue gets weird about it or the people just stop coming or whatever. But I caught that one at a really good time. And it was within walking distance of my house.
Oh, nice.
So I would walk over there with my little notebook, and it was pretty supportive. Like I almost didn't go up the first time because I was so nervous. And then everyone was just really nice, and they were very supportive. And I was just like, well, the big thing I don't always believe it when I tell myself this, but anytime I'm nervous about a big, like a new thing or a show, I always tell myself like, there are like 500 people around the world doing exactly this right now. And whether they succeed or fail, you'll never know about it.
Yeah.
Like if I walk up here and just drop my pants and embarrass myself, the world will not fall off its axis and everything will be fine. So, and I had to pep talk myself into that. But
that's what I had people, when I tell them I used to do it, they're like, how'd you do that? I go, you're nervous every time. But that same thing, like after a while, you're like, okay, well, I'm just up here because I want to get better, and if they don't like it, whatever, it doesn't matter. I'm trying to. I took the mindset of, especially for open mics, I want to get these recorded for me so I can hear them. Obviously, we're there to please the crowd, so if that happens, cool. But first step for me is just get them out there and let's see that. You know?
Yeah, and you can't. And ironically, like you're more likely to make a crowd happy if you don't hyper fixate on that.
Mm-hmm.
If you just focus on making your jokes better and don't internalize the fact that like, oh, there's people in this bar not listening to me because they didn't know this was happening and we ambushed them with comedy.
That's a lot of open mics are surprise open mics.
Right. And people, and it's like they have the right to be disinterested, but you have the right to also not care that much, so and I've really hit a point since I came back after taking a break with the pandemic. I've gotten to a level now where I used to say this a lot, but I think I actually feel it now, where I'll go up and I'll acknowledge that they are not a great crowd, or I'll acknowledge that we're not all having a good time here.
Yeah.
And just kind of be more like in the moment and just like, hey, let's just, what, we're all here. This is, if this is the worst thing we have to deal with today, it's going to be fine. It's like, or or just maybe like humorously sort of take, do something. I mentioned last week at an open mic that everyone there individually was pretty nice, but that collectively they had kind of a room temperature cottage cheese vibe. And then some of them gave me like a dirty look and they were kind of like, "No, he's right. Yeah, this is." And then by the end, I was getting laughs. But it sort of like it's sort of like, let's just address the elephant in the room here. This isn't going well, and I'm not going to go up here and, "Hey, everybody, how you doing?" Blah, and pretend that it is. But I'm also not going to like, "I hate you. You're ruining my life." I just like let's just acknowledge that things are a little weird right now, and then I'll tell my little jokes, and then I'll go home.
and that's the nature of open mics. I mean, they're just. I mean, weird. They're weird places. They're weird setups, or it's in the, I did a show. I think Meredith did one in like a restaurant, but it was the wine part of a restaurant, and people were like standing in aisles, but it was like a show, like it's just wherever it is, and it's already weird in some of these places. So just like enjoy yourself a little bit,
Yeah, and it's always neat to me when you see a place that. Because it just basically any show, like if you walked into a play and you didn't know what a play was, you'd be like, why are they talking like that? Why are we all sitting and watching? This is, we've all just agreed that that's a thing.
Yeah.
So like one of my favorite spots to do shows on tour is a brewery down in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, where they do a show, and it's a very small place. So they do the show in the storage room where all the empty kegs are. And there's only enough room for like 3 rows of folding chairs.
Wow.
And you are right up on everybody. And you're standing behind a giant wall of kegs. And you're just in this tiny little like fire hazard place. And if you didn't know, like it's one of those things where like if there's 4 or 5 people and they kind of wandered in there, it's like, this is awful. Why are we doing? But once you get that critical mass and you get 10 or 20 people and there's like somebody has a really good set. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, now it's a party. Now it's a show. Now we're listening. Now we're engaged. We've all signed on to the contract here. And the fact that the show has been going for a long time, now there's an established. It's kind of the ground rules are already set.
Yes,
this is the thing. It's always really tough the first time you do a show in a new space because it's like, what are you doing? Why did you start talking into that mic? But if you can kind of power through that, and God love people who have the fortitude to do it because it's so hard to put a show together and, power through those rough early ones and make it a thing. Like, and get people. If you really break it down, it's the amount of bravado it takes to invite, like, I'm going to put 100 chairs on a roof and I want you to come listen to me.
Yeah.
I just want to talk to you and I don't want you to talk. I want you to spend a bunch of money on beer and stuff while I talk. And I want you to laugh. And I want you to react appropriately to my social cues. And I don't want you to talk to me afterward other than to tell me I did a good job.
and we're also going to bring up a bunch of other strangers.
Right. And then just when you get comfortable, here's somebody else that you might not like. and it's the balls it takes to hey, we're doing this, okay?
Yeah.
But it's when it works, it's the best thing in the world.
I
So,
never like I understood that when I would go to these shows, and I respect that people are trying to do something here. But you're right, it doesn't sink in until you try to do one. I did it with my brother-in-law at a bar downtown that my sister-in-law worked at, and it was good because he knows how to run shows because he does music and he had a podcast. He knows how to do all that stuff, but the nervousness of like I was so nervous. I would always just pay someone else to host. Like I didn't even want to host my own show. Like I just want people to go. I want somewhere to go, somewhere where I can pay a headliner $50 to go up there, and to have my friends make some money because this is hard to do, right? But it was so nerve wracking because it was one of those things where we had to tell people, hey, in 10 minutes, I know you probably didn't know, but we're having a comedy show, and then half the people leave because they don't want to be there, which is fine. Like you said, it's their right. They don't have to be there.
right?
But then to see like people, oh, you're here. By the way, we're here for comedy. Oh yeah, we want to be at the comedy show. Like, oh yeah, that makes me feel better. But it is a hard thing to do.
Yeah, and there's never been a substitute for doing comedy in front of people.
Mhm.
Like, and we definitely learned that in the pandemic because
Yeah.
everyone tried to do Zoom shows and stuff. And I mean, a few people seem to take to them and everything, but most people, like the minute, I mean, there were a lot of people that were probably out way too early that should not have been out in public breathing on people.
Yeah.
But they were just like, I can't do another damn Zoom show. I
Yeah.
can't do it. And there's no equivalent to practicing your guitar in your basement.
Mm-hmm.
Like you can't come out of the basement. You can't come out of the basement as a great comedian.
Sure.
You have to sit there and embarrass yourself 500 times in front of open mic crowds to get to that point where you can maybe embarrass yourself in front of a comedy club crowd, and then maybe just keep making those steps up and up and up. But at each step, you have to be in front of an audience because it's not recording a monologue. It's not writing a book. It's not like it's something that has to exist. They're as much a part of it as you are.
Well, you need reaction. You need audience participation. If it's frowns or smiles, like you need that part of it.
Yeah, I mean, there has to be the feedback is instant, and you have to have it. You can't. I mean, as long as I've been doing it, I still have a couple things in my notebook that I swear to God, I wrote it down. I laughed at myself. I thought this is going to be the closer on my next album. This is it. This is my signature. Nobody likes it.
Yeah.
It's what, and I would have guessed 100% that was going to be one of my best bits, and it just nothing.
And there's nothing like, because you feel that, and then when you do it, there's nothing more draining than when it falls flat because you, like you said, this is gonna work, and then it doesn't. And you're like, great. Now that was my home run. Now what am I gonna do?
Yeah, it's nice to be a little more experienced and have like a couple things in the holster. And I've been going like when I've been doing long sets now, I've only really been back at it for a few months, but I've got that 10 years in my back pocket and a couple albums worth of material. And I've really been going up lately. Originally, I thought to myself, well, I'm not going to headline until I have all new material.
Yeah.
I'm taking all the pre-pandemic stuff. I'm scrapping it. I'm starting over. And then like a week later, someone's like, you want to headline a show? And it's like, crap. I can't do 45 new minutes next week, or whatever. So, and then some of those, and some of those bits, I'm still, I don't like everything I've written. I would be a psychopath if I did.
Sure.
But there's still stuff. There's stuff that hasn't been recorded yet that I still think is good. And I was like, well, there's no reason to just chuck all that out. So, and plus a lot of it now, like I'm telling some of these stories about being on the road and stuff sort of through the lens of this was how things were for me. This is what I was doing before the pandemic.
Yeah.
This is what I was doing when this was all I wanted to do. Like, I don't have that single-mindedness about it anymore, but it's fun to kind of go. It's almost like being sober but telling stories about your drinking days. It's
Sure.
like I don't do this anymore, but man, when I did, you're not gonna believe this crap.
Yeah.
But it was so it's been, but I've been going up with much less of a plan ahead of time. I used to be really rigid about set lists, and I'm not a crowd work guy. I don't sit there ask people questions. I don't like getting interacted with. I'm like telling stories. I have long bits. I don't want to deal with a crisis in the room or shut somebody up that won't quit talking. I just want to do my thing. But now there's a lot more just like, what are we talking about now? I just sort of let it fly, and it's been fun, and it's a new level of scary for me because I don't have a plan.
Yeah.
But I know I have stuff back. I have a whole holster full of stuff I can use, and it's been one of the most fun things for me is to be just really going at it, and then look down at my phone and go, "Oh crap, I got to wrap it up. I'm done." Like I've actually just made 45 minutes just flew by, which is such a great feeling.
Yeah, and that's and I like being in the community. It's cool to see like people do obviously like reach some success, whatever your degree of success is. But like when you like had your taping in that Mommy Indoor Theater, like being able to go to that thing and like see it and then see our other friends up there that you had open for you, like it not only like makes me like, oh, I want to do that at the time, but like also be happy for you guys and also like it's just a lot of emotions because like I want to be that, but also happy but I'm just happy to be in the crowd, a part of it.
Right, and that was a really, I mean, that's still probably one of the most gratifying things I've ever done because that was just me. I mean, I was I did everything from I rented the theater with my own money. I set the deal up with the beer company because they don't have a bar there. I was literally chopping vegetables for a backstage deli tray the day of the show.
Telling me that, yeah.
And I say that not to like I'm such a hard worker, but it's like, well, plus first of all, I needed something to do or I was going to go crazy. I was so nervous. Surprised I didn't chop a finger off.
But that's what you had to do,
right? But we micromanaged that thing so much. We did the Eventbrite tickets. We had seating charts put together. It was like I specified where to put certain people I knew because I knew they had good laughs.
Oh,
and I wanted to make sure that they were evenly spaced throughout the room.
Yeah.
And we didn't sell the room out, but we got like 250
There's
people.
A lot of people there.
We sold 250 tickets.
Yes.
I did not give tickets away. I didn't give I think maybe half a dozen. I didn't give tickets to family or I just was like, this is my thing. I don't ask you to come to every open mic. I don't ask you to do this, but if you can come to this and support it. And I was able to pay the film crew and stuff out of the money we made. And it was just, it really felt like part of us. Like there were comics from Detroit and Cleveland who came. They didn't have to do that.
Yeah.
And, they came and bought tickets. They didn't even tell me they were coming. They didn't do the, hey, you got a guest list or, it was just, I just was out in the lobby pacing around and they walked in the door. And I was like, oh my God, why would you do that? That's amazing. And I try to do that now because I know how good it made me feel. Like I've just shown up at people's recordings in other cities and stuff like that, not like hey, I'm going out to do this. Look at me. Just buy a ticket, walk in the door, take a seat. And you have a good time. It's it's not like one of the things we all say it at shows. We're always like, thank you for supporting live comedy. But it's like such a PBS fun drive thing to say. Like, thank you for burdening yourself with the support of comedy. Like come do it because it's fun. Come, there's a comedy show a good comedy show is like it's not too long. It's about as long as a movie, and you're gonna have a couple drinks. You maybe have some food or whatever, and you're gonna have somebody say some funny stuff, and you're gonna I have people who will sometimes just randomly message me on Facebook that saw me in Iowa or some 7 or 8 years ago. That'll be like, hey, I saw a guy on the side of the road with this on his car, and it made me think of the joke you did, or just some.
Wow.
And it's like, that's been living in that dude's head since I said it, just laying there dormant.
Yeah. And
holy crap, that's mind blowing.
Yeah.
And but then I, as a fan of comedy, I do the same thing. I think of I'll randomly just start laughing, thinking of not even like the punchline of a joke, but just a particular wording or a particular phrase or something that just really makes me think of that friend of mine or think of that comedian. And it's for all of the baggage that comes with comedy and all the weird schisms with comedy and and there's a lot of it is stuff that you don't really even know about unless you're doing it, and it's such inside baseball that no one gives a crap about. But at its purest form, it's just, man, that person said some hilarious shit and it made me laugh so hard, and that's going to stay in me forever.
Yeah.
And that's being able to enjoy that and being able to give it to do it for other people is the best thing in the world.
That's I do the same thing. Like I love going to shows, or like I went to Mike Czar's taping,
Right.
Sam Rager when she had one. Like it's just going there and knowing I'm gonna have a good time. A lot of times my wife and I will, like for Sam's, I think we got a hotel and we stay the night there. You know, like
Nice.
just to make like an evening and also support. Or when people are selling things, like I like supporting that way because they're doing something that I wish I could do all the time, like
Right.
stand-up comedy, but I can't. So if I can support you and it helps you get better or get further or whatever, then I feel like a little part of me is like with you, right? And
Right.
that's the cool part of it.
Yeah, there's a lot to be said. Like that's one of the things that kind of tying back to the music scene thing. You know, since I stopped playing music and I don't write professionally, I got to a point where I was writing for a couple magazines and websites, and then about 2010, pretty much around the time I started doing comedy, I was so burnt out. Like before everything went digital and they were just sending links, I would probably get like a dozen CDs a day in the mail every day. My mailbox was just, I had to get a PO box because I was getting so many, and it was all things I was supposed to write reviews of, and I was sick of it. I never just went back and listened to music for fun. I wasn't a fan anymore. I was just cranking out prose. I was like, this band really challenged themselves, but their riffs are this and that, blah, blah, blah. And nobody cares. And I quit pretty abruptly, and I just started going like, today I'm going to just listen to Iron Maiden all day. I haven't done that in years, but now I can because I'm not on a deadline. It's not a chore anymore. And now, especially now, we kind of bottomed out with everybody going online and streaming and stuff. But now with like sites like Bandcamp and there's with social media, you can keep up with bands so much better and stuff.
Yeah.
There's so many ways to just support. Like I'm just forever, like someone will post a link to a song and I'll be like, I love that song. And I'll find the band's Bandcamp. Oh, they're selling a cassette tape for $7.
Yeah.
Click, just buy, and it's, do I need that? No. But is that band going to be able to do stuff because they sold 100 cassette tapes that no one really actually physically needed because they're already listening to it on their computer? But it's nice to have the thing.
Yeah.
And it's nice to be part of that. It's nice, And I've really reconnected, I think, with being a fan of stuff. Because I think for a long time with, playing music, trying to get ahead in music. And then even when I started comedy and I was there for a while, I was a little bit, single-minded and like I'm grinding. I'm out here doing. I drive the furthest. I do the most stuff, and I'm And then it's just like just like what you like and be into it. And so and make it more of a two-way street where I want people to support what I'm doing, but I also want to reach out. I want to support. I want to be a fan of things and take that pleasure in watching somebody get to the next level. And I think you have to do both.
Yeah.
It's like there's a really good Stephen King book called On Writing where he talks about the process. And he's like, you can't write if you don't read. And that seems like the most basic thing in the world, but he said so many people never, like they get out of college or high school, they never read another book again. But then they want to write novels. And everything sounds like the 6 books they read in high school. They don't have any frame of reference. They don't know what's current. They don't know what people are doing. And you see that sometimes at open mic. You'll see someone who's probably never watched a comedy special past 15 years ago, and then they get up and they start doing jokes that are really stale or like clearly like a product of someone who grew up in the 90s. And it's like somebody just doing like a
You sound like Dane Cook.
right, or like you'll see a guy just get up. Oh, I've always wanted to do this, and he just sounds like Ray Romano, and it's like things have moved on a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm not saying you got to reinvent the wheel, or but when we can pick your influences from that far away, then everybody has to start somewhere. But I don't think you can grow in any field unless you're also like you enjoy it yourself and you're a fan of it and you're immersing yourself in it, kind of.
Well, I think too for me, I think you might have been at the Funny Bone for one of my very first times I went on stage. I remember like talking to you or saying something to you afterward. But for me, and I can't speak for everybody, but like Anthony Martinez and Mike and Reese, those guys, like I felt like we like looked towards you all the time and like, hey, what's he doing? Or you were always putting shows on or running open mics or doing this stuff. And I felt like you were a big help here. And I only know it for the 4 years I was in it. But that was my perception, and I know that because you put me on shows, or you took me with you once in Michigan, and I don't know if I, my wife just found this, literally just found this today, the Claudia comedy series.
Oh, jeez.
And I was looking on here. We saved it obviously because my name was on it,
Right.
but she found it in a drawer, and I was looking at that. I was like, man, I don't know if I should have been on there or not. But it was so much fun to do, and that was my longest set I've ever. It was 20 minutes, the most money I ever made doing it.
Right.
But it was such a good time, and I knew and then I would do. I think I did your rooftop series once, but I knew hey, if Keith is running it, there's gonna be no issues with this, and I always felt good. If you were at a show, or if you were at this new open mic that I was going to, I knew it was a legit thing because you were there, and I just appreciate you when I was doing it. I appreciate you being around because it made me feel more comfortable and knowing why I should do these things, or if I had questions, I could ask you about things.
Man, well, I appreciate that, and I don't take that lightly. It's weird because I definitely had that I think coming in a little bit older, recent Anthony were 21, I think, when they started. So I was, I always had that little bit of a den mother thing going on.
Yeah.
And then when I started taking the initiative to set things up and stuff, a lot of comics don't want anything to do with that.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to learn more about the mechanics of running a show and stuff. And I wanted to be able to sort of swap with other people. Hey, I can book you on this thing if you can help me get something in that city.
Yes, yeah.
So it was a lot of hopscotching from place to place.
Yeah.
And I did, but it's weird to have that role where people are kind of looking up to you or looking to you for advice and things, and then simultaneously feel like you're just starting out. I always feel silly giving people advice when it's well, I haven't done anything. I can't get booked in Detroit. But it is. I try to be cognizant of where I am in the, in this thing, and I try to help people when I can, because I feel like I do spend a lot of time on negativity, and I try not to. Mm-hmm. But you see so many people who will go and just be willfully ignorant. They'll go and try they'll show up at an open mic and I'm gonna offend everybody,
yeah.
and I'm just gonna they'll just do things that are counterproductive, or you see people who are just genuinely do bad people things, they'll steal somebody's room from them, or they'll harass a comedian, and it's when you see that. So when I see people that I think are on the right track, or who, if there's anything I can do to help them, I love helping bring them up. Right now, I've got a couple headlining weekends in the next few months where I'm bringing John Ruggiero, who's a newer
man. I love him.
He's so
yeah.
And it's so funny because, now, and it's funny because when I came back after being away for a couple of years, there were really new people looking up to him the same way that you guys would look to me for stuff.
Yeah.
That John was kind of that. And you'd see him kind of lean back in his chair well, what I would do is... And I'm sitting there what are you talking about? You're a baby. You're not... And I was no, he's been here for 7 years now, dude, and you haven't been. They don't know who you are. So it was... Having that break was a really good sort of mental palate cleanser for me. Mm-hmm. I was really down on comedy for a while, but I think a lot of it was more just me reacting to the pandemic and to the world at large.
Okay.
It wasn't so much... I was misplacing a lot of negative energy toward the world into the thing that I spent the most time on. And I think a lot of it was mourning too, because I had gotten to a point by the beginning of 2020 where it really was a full-time job.
Yeah.
It was a full-time job for me for a while, in quotes, because, I was basically working from home during the week and then running out and losing a bunch of money driving places. But then I got to the point, it's something out of a sitcom, but in January of 2020, I looked at my calendar and I said to my wife, I think this is going to be my year.
Yeah. Because it was nobody's year.
Right. But that month, I headlined in different states every weekend. Mm-hmm. I made about as much money as she did at her day job just doing comedy.
Yeah.
And I was this is the dream. This is what I was very cognizant of that moment. We put the time in. We knew it was going to be a long slog through this as a family. We had to talk about it. We did it. We had a plan, and we're doing it, and it's working. And then everything comes to a stop.
Yeah.
And it was really, I was pretty upset, and I was pretty mad, and I was definitely well, screw comedy. I'm never doing this again. And it's so hard to get out of it. It's so hard to when you have those moments that are so great on stage, when you really connect with people and stuff, or when you're sitting at home and you think of something or you observe something that you that would make such a good bit
all the time.
That's what what brought me back. This groundhog in my backyard.
Really?
There's a groundhog in my backyard who struts around like he owns the place. He sits up on his haunches and he eats leaves off the tree and stuff. And I sit and watch him and I'm like, I gotta talk about this damn groundhog.
Yeah, I gotta tell somebody.
And it went. Now I have a 10-minute bit that starts with the groundhog and ends with talking about my dad in a nuclear war.
Wow.
And it goes into this whole, and it's really like it gets into some deep water with like stuff about when I'm growing up and like the small town. Like the reason I never saw a groundhog up close is because I lived around a bunch of people with guns. There was no such thing as a close-up groundhog.
A close-up groundhog.
There was a faraway groundhog and there was a fine pink mist. That was it. And now I'm running bits. I'm sorry.
No, you're fine.
But it goes into like growing up with my dad and the kind of guy my dad is and how we were different. But it all came from literally just me looking out my kitchen window, drinking coffee, watching this stupid groundhog.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to talk about this. This is something that would be funny. And it made me think of other things. And then that like all those little like Lego pieces start connecting in your head, and then you're off.
Yeah. It made me. It made me so happy to see like, hey, I'm doing this thing again, because I know how much you loved it and how much time you put into it and everything. And I still write stuff down every once in a while, like, oh, this is cool, or this is funny. Or if I say something funny, when I'm coaching or to my staff at work, like all these things that I could talk about. Or I think about like, oh, this would be a cool show. I worked at the Providence Metro Park in Grand Rapids, and they have that canal boat. And my boss there found out he found out I did stand-up comedy. He goes, I always wanted to do a comedy night on the canal boat. And I was like, that would be awesome. I was like, and I have plenty of people, like if you want people on here, I know people that would come out here. And it's just something that never happened. But I think it'd be a cool thing, especially because everything's so old there. And it was just like, I told him too, I had these jokes about forcing people on this boat and they can't leave, because it's a comedy show and it doesn't matter if you're good or not, they can't leave.
Right.
Or even working for the Metro Parks, like we have an awesome rental spaces, like all these places that could do things, and I think that's where I'm shifting towards, is like just creating spaces for people.
Right.
But it was, to go back to originally, like I was so excited to see you doing it again, and I'm glad you are doing it. Do you have like, I know you would book a lot of your own tours. Is that anything happening like that now, or is that still off a little bit?
Well, I just started. I think I have 2 actual like headlining club weekends on the books total.
Okay.
I'm in South Bend next month, and then I'm in Traverse City in March. I just talked to my friend Derek Sheen, who's a comedian who he's based out of Seattle. He just came through on a tour.
Okay.
And he's around the same age as me. We have a lot in common as far as like dealing with these sort of like, what are we do? He was literally just like closing out the open mic at Grumpy Dave's in Bowling Green. Like that was, it's like I came all this way and this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But he's also working on a new hour of material, and he goes out and opens for Patton Oswalt and stuff. So he's got, he's doing these little low rent shows, but then he's got a place to go and do these big things too.
Yeah.
And he and I are talking about possibly doing a West Coast tour in the summer.
Oh, nice.
So I really want to go back and hit some places. I said I wasn't going to travel too much, but then I find that I'm missing a lot of places. And there's a lot of places too that I would like to get some closure, if it makes sense. Like there's one particular club in Rochester, Minnesota called Goonies, and I featured there 4 times. Mm-hmm. It's 10.5 hours each way, and I drove out there to be the opener.
Oh, really?
And a couple times it was on the route of a longer run I put together. But a couple times it was literally just get up Friday morning at 6 a.m., drive all the way to Minnesota, do 2 shows, do 2 shows the next day, get up Sunday morning and drive home. Mm-hmm. And it was always with the idea that this is going to pay off eventually.
Yeah.
The last time I was there, the owner actually was like, well, I feel like I got 2 headliners this weekend. And I was like, well, I appreciate that because I can't keep doing this.
Yeah.
I really need to headline next time. And he said, no problem. And then, of course, everything.
Oh, okay.
So I'd like to go back there again. A lot of it is just reestablishing those business contacts and, getting some new comedy clips online that aren't 6 years old. Because I really, like, as proud as I am of the Goldfish recording, I'm still sending that out as like a clip, and it's like it's 6 years old now.
Yeah.
So I need new stuff I need new, God, I'm gonna be somebody's dad. Like, how do I make reels? I can't get the Instagram to work. And but I have to kind of get back into that aspect of it, get some new stuff up. I'm working on a plan to do some EPs. I'm gonna just record like 20 minutes of new stuff and get it up on streaming.
Okay.
And then 20 more minutes, get it up on streaming. I'm not gonna wait to do a whole album. I'm gonna just get some new material out there. It's the crazy thing, and another really gratifying thing is, I have my 2 albums that are on Spotify and Apple Music and everything, and I only really follow Spotify because it's the one I use as a customer. As far as like the statistics and the artist, you get the monthly breakdown and stuff, and I don't even really dive into like, I got 2 listeners in Mongolia this week or whatever. I know that there's all those stats are there, but they send you a breakdown of like, and I still have like 400 or 500 listeners a month.
Oh wow, which
blows my mind for old. I mean, I put that stuff. I mean, I recorded it in 2016. I don't think we put it up until like 2018, but it's all pretty old material at this point, and it's still on people's comedy playlists. I know there's a couple of like on Spotify, at least there's a couple like Ohio, Michigan comedy playlists or some Midwestern comedy, and people are still listening to those jokes and getting exposed to it. It's new to them.
Yeah.
And it's gratifying, but also it gets kind of it lights a fire under like, I got to get some of this new stuff. If you like that, you're going to really like this stuff.
If you like that, listen to this groundhog bit.
Right. You're going to love the groundhog. But I want to get these new things down, and I want to kind of get, sort of establish that I'm coming back. But I don't want to be as single-minded about it as I was. I don't want to do the tour I did right before everything shut down. I spent pretty much all of November 2019 on the road.
Oh, wow.
And it was too much.
Okay.
I almost, at one point, I was actually like actively disassociating on the road. Driving, I was so tired. I was driving, we had driven from Cincinnati to Huntsville, done a show, and then we were driving another hour and a half to my sister's house before I could sleep.
Yeah.
And I wasn't like drinking and driving. I wasn't high. I was
Tired.
just, and I might as well have been drunk because I shouldn't have been driving. And I look back now, like that was, why was I doing that?
How did he die? He drove to a show to make $17.
Right. It was, a Monday night in Huntsville.
Yeah.
In a bar where they still let people smoke. That had a lot to do with it because I was, doing 45 minutes in a smoky room when that's not the norm anymore. Oh. It's like, that's all of a sudden, it's like, I'm going to die.
It's a lot of work, I feel like, on your body.
It hurts. And then, it's 90 minutes till I can lay down? Okay.
Yeah.
And luckily we made it and everything, but it was overly ambitious. It really didn't serve any purpose as far as like, I don't think it made me a better comic, but it's hard, and I think another aspect of coming at it a little bit later in life, I'd always had that, like, I have to do it all right now. I can't put this off till next year because I'm already 40 or I'm already 45, whatever. And it's like, so I just would try to do everything at once, and then I would just wear myself out.
Yeah.
And I don't ever want to be burnt out on it again. I want to have as much fun as I did when I first started, and it was just a bunch of us getting in the car and driving to Detroit to do 5 minutes and talk to our friends.
Yeah.
And I don't want to lose that. And because I'm not going to nobody's going to come pluck me out of Toledo and give me a sitcom or put me on Comedy Central. Those things are probably out of reach. And if they do happen, they're going to happen because I'm having fun, not because I made myself drive 10 hours a day.
Yeah.
So it's trying to fit it into my life in a more enjoyable manner.
And that's what, it goes back to the beginning. This is the lifestyle you want to live. Let's make it the best we can do it without harming yourself or anybody else,
Right. And there's, and it's easy to get caught up, and then, a lot of the stuff that you get caught up with becomes some of that inside baseball stuff where you're really obsessed with things that nobody outside that circle cares about. What they want to know is, are you funny? Yeah. Are we going to enjoy ourselves if we come see you?
Yeah.
Are you going to be a dude that we're happy to follow on Facebook because you make us laugh? That's all. And anything beyond, the further you get from that center, the more you risk, I think, not making it a good part of your life.
Yeah.
So I trying to focus on the good stuff.
Well, good, man. Well, I appreciate you coming out here. I'm so happy that you're back in it.
Thanks.
And I look forward to coming out and watching you whenever I have free time. We're still in the midst of football season here. But again, man, thanks for coming out here.
Oh, my pleasure. Thanks. Good to see you.
Thanks, everybody, for checking out this episode of the Nerd Ball Podcast. Please rate, review, and subscribe wherever you're hearing this, on any of the podcatchers. On YouTube, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We're coming at you 2 times a week now, audio and video. Check us out on all the social medias. Just search the Nerd Ball Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. We're out there. Gmail is the nerdballpodcast@gmail.com. If you want to shoot us an email, we'll be happy to get back to you. Thanks to Real JP Multimedia, Cuttlefish Graphics, Perrysburg Junior High STEM Lab, and Big Daddy Graphics for helping out the podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.